This session is now being recorded. Today, welcome. You're here for a lunch and learn, and we're here hearing about Float, the cash flow forecasting solution. Float provides insightful cash flow forecasting and scenario planning that gives you and your clients an actionable, easy to understand picture of their business future. And we are very fortunate to have Amanda, who is in Sydney, here to tell us all about Float. So thank you so much, Amanda, for joining us. And while she is joining us, if you want to, you can drop in questions in the chat area, and then towards the end, we'll open up to Q&A. But thank you, and I'll hand over to you, Amanda.
Yeah, thanks so much, Heather. Thanks for having me on today. I'm so excited to be doing this. As Heather mentioned, I'm Amanda, working here in Float, and I'm on the success team here in Sydney. So I'll be taking you through Float, just pointing out a few key features about the product. And then at the end, I'll go through a little demo of the platform itself. And then any questions at all, as Heather said, please feel free to pop them through, and I'll be more than happy to go over them at the end. So I'll just share my screen, and hopefully you guys can see that.
Yes, we can.
Great stuff. So I won't go into too much detail there. Just Float, or Heather actually just mentioned what Float is. So I'll just kick off with the first question here that we have. If I can just get this to go ahead. So what problem does Float aim to solve? So Float exists to help businesses build sustainable and successful businesses. And we found that cash flow is one of the biggest challenges for businesses. And you, as their advisor, you're in the best position to help support them with this. And now more than ever, businesses owners are being faced with the possibility of unfortunately, business failure. And as you can see here, 82% of businesses that do fail, they cite that cash flow as being one of the main reasons. We also found as well, just speaking to a few different customers that we have in Float, that sometimes when they're thinking about their business, and if they're stressed, if they're fatigued, if they're finding it difficult to make those hard and fast decisions, that they're not making that connection with cash flow as being a solution. And there's one of two things here to consider, is that first of all, your clients are not interested, or as I said, they're not making that connection. And secondly, that it's in the form of a spreadsheet. And often many partners that we actually work with are doing cash flow for their clients, but generally, again, it's in the form of a spreadsheet, and it might look a little bit like this. So that's when you wonder why the first question or challenge we see is that my clients aren't interested in cash flow. Not only is this very hard to read, but unless your client is really good with numbers and formulas, you're always going to need to be drawing that information out of them and then trying to keep that up to date as you go along. And that can be a difficult situation to be in. And our goal is to shift away from this and allow you to provide clients with a cash flow forecast that's easy to understand and simple enough that they can work with you to help keep that on track. This is what your new cash flow would look like. So we're focusing here on the element that your client understands the most, and that's their bank balance on any given day. And Flow can, work with anyone who's not financially savvy. So even if it's a new client that you might just be getting started with, who's not, in the numbers day in, day out, and they're not too familiar, or perhaps, as I said, they're not that interested in it. Flow is a great way to slowly introduce them to that, because it's quite, as you can see, a visual and easy way to understand your cash flow. We can also model out scenarios on the fly, and that's without the risk of breaking any formulas within a spreadsheet or updating any figures that you might not, remember what you've updated, and then it can just cause a big confusion within that spreadsheet. And you can give those answers to your clients, those key business questions they're asking, you can give those answers to them in real time. And what we've heard from customers using Float is that they might spend 3 or 4 hours mulling over a spreadsheet, trying to figure out, can they hire a new staff member and so on, or, as you can see on screen here, if they were to lose a client, that might take you 3 or 4 hours. With Float, you can get that quick answer within 10 to 15 minutes or less. So what works well with Float? So one thing to note here, particularly if you're still thinking, that my clients aren't interested in cash flow, is the majority of them aren't. So most, of your clients wouldn't be interested in the cash flow advisory service, but you'd find then that clients are actually thinking of these questions, or they're asking you these questions already. And that essentially is the cash flow advisory service. So they're asking things like, can I afford to hire this new employee? If I do hire them, how much can I afford to pay them? Can I take money out of the business? Or what happens if a project falls through, and so on. So you'll find that they're already asking you these questions, and they might not think that that's cash flow advisory. So what we kind of tend to say here is not to lead with, I want to offer you a cash flow advisory service, to potentially lead with these questions. And that way then you can link that back around where they might have that aha moment where they'll realize, okay, this is actually a cash flow service and I need this for the business because I'm constantly asking these questions and I'm constantly wondering about, what I can actually do within the business, especially to help it grow. So these are some factors that we would say to consider when you are thinking about, choosing a client where you can use this cash flow advisory service with them, or you can potentially offer this to them. What we tend to say is that there's no one typical float customer. So this wouldn't be one size fits all. It might be tailored depending on what the client is looking for. So you might want to think about the type of business, the mindset, and how on top of their bookkeeping they are. So when you're going to your clients with this, asking those questions of what they actually want to achieve, what they're looking for, how on top of their bookkeeping are. Will it be you that will be having that communication with the suppliers and their invoices and bills? Will you be doing the chasing and the payments, or does your client actually have that close relationship with them? So it's about having these conversations. And I
could just see on there, they've got little masks on. You're little on the type of business, the people have got little masks on, don't they?
I actually never realized that before.
Sorry to interrupt, but
no, not at all. That's definitely very good to point out. I mean, that's
so current.
I was just going to say that's our modern day, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. So yeah, that's why we have worked out then with a lot of our partners, we've developed this ideal client profile. So I'll just show you this here. So this is a PDF that we can share with you guys if anyone is interested in it and all. I'll leave some contact details at the end and we can definitely share this and another few resources that we do have. What this does, it helps you go through the nuts and bolts with your clients. So you can, as I said, specifically pick out which clients this is going to suit the best. And within Float here, for our partners, we actually go one step further. We do client reviews with your partners on our partners who are on the bronze plan and above. So we can have that conversation with you to ensure that you're having those conversations with your clients and you're deciding exactly who that would suit the best, and you're not kind of wasting time trying to find clients who suit this, that you're going through certain questions, certain steps. And as I said, we can share this with you if there is interest in that. Now, in terms of what it's not ideal for, so what we say here is that when to think about when a direct cash flow forecast isn't appropriate. So Float uses a direct method when it comes to cash flow forecasting. So as I mentioned there with the ideal client profile, you might have clients who are not interested in looking at their numbers, or they possibly spend too much time worrying about the cost of your service. So they might start pushing back on this. Or as I said, they probably would not, they might not be interested in it at all. And it wouldn't be in the best interest of your time and the client's time to be spending time trying to offer the service to them when it's, as I said, it's just not something they're interested in. So focusing that time elsewhere on a pool of clients who will really benefit from this. And also clients who need a long-term strategic forecast without the need for accurate week-to-week cash movement. So if your client is not interested in seeing that daily ingoings and outgoings, then again, a cash flow advisory service or Float wouldn't be suitable to them. And it's best to kind of stick within that group of clients who will really benefit from something like this. So who does Float actually integrate with? So Float integrates with QuickBooks Online, Xero, and Free Agent. We pull in every single cash transaction and then also the associated account from Xero. We also pull in all of the invoices and bills, as well as any draft and recurring bills if you are using these in Xero. Now we do sync every 24 hours with your Xero file. And then we also allow you to manually update the sync whenever required. So let's say you are going into Xero, into your client's file, and you're updating, you're doing some reconciliations, perhaps updating dates on invoices and bills. You can actually go on your Float account then and trigger that manual sync, so it will pull in the information a lot sooner. And just to point out as well, most importantly, we don't push any information back into Xero. We'll only pull that data in one way. And the reason for this is that it ensures you keep control of their Xero file, but then you're also encouraging your clients to be more hands-on when it comes to managing their cash, so they can be going into float, updating those dates. Again, if they have that relationship with their customers, with the payments that are coming through, that they can go through and they can have that more hands-on approach in their float account. Now, when it comes to your typical app stack, so these are just a few of the workflow automation apps. So as Float relies on data being up to date in your Xero file, most users will have some form of, workflow automation software in place using apps such as Dext, which is previously Receipt Bank. You have HubDoc there and Easy Bills. And then another app that does help to ensure your Xero file is clean and up to date is Expert. And we would recommend having a look into it, as it really does a great job at, sending alerts if things are out of place in your client Xero file and so on. In terms of the setup process, so we kind of say the cleaner the data, the faster the setup. So a forecast, is only as good as the data that you put into it. So when it does come to the setup, the more cleaner and accurate and up to date that the Xero file would be, then the quicker the setup into Float would be. So you can see here our website, if you go to floatapp.com and you look for the partner section, you can just connect your Xero file, and you can also avail of a free license for your firm, and that's always free as long as you're with Float. And you just allow the system to then import your data in one sweep. So as I said, having your Xero file kind of ready and as up to date as possible, it's then going to give you quite a nice, accurate picture of your Float account. And now I was going to jump into a demo, if that's all right with you, Heather.
Absolutely, that's fantastic. And as Amanda does that, if you do have any questions, start thinking about them, stop dropping them in the chat area, or prepare, and you can join us once Amanda's done a demo. Thank you.
Great stuff. So I'll just start here on the partner dashboard, just so you have a familiar idea of what it would look like when you do sign up. Now, I have a good few companies here down the left-hand side. You might just have a couple of clients, or perhaps maybe you have 10 or 20, but they'll all be listed down here on the left-hand side. And then at the very bottom, you have your free license. So as I said, your firm will always have free access to Float down here. If I just jump into my demo company, and what I'll do is I'll jump to the cash flow tab. When you are getting set up with your client, it's probably the main place that you will spend a lot of your time. So you have your total reconciled balance up here from Xero. So again, it's pulling that information directly from Xero. Below that, you have the graph. Now you can see here the day-by-day balance changing. So again, it's giving you that really granular level of detail of your client's cash. And the base here is made up of your budgets that you get entered into Float, which I'll go through there now in a moment. Also, any upcoming payment dates on invoices and bills, and then also any bank accounts and credit cards that you've included up here. And if I just jump into your invoices due, so as I mentioned, we pull these automatically in from Xero. You can see here on the left, we have this red bar. Now, aside from keeping on top of your reconciliation, it's also really important to keep the payment dates on your bills and invoices as up to date and accurate as possible. Because if you've any bills or invoices that are past their expected payment date, Float thinks they're payable today. So as you can see here, I have almost $11,000 coming in, and that's causing an inaccuracy in my forecast because Float thinks it's payable today. But if I come down here, you can see I can update the dates down here. So the original due date comes from Xero. We can't change that, but you can change the expected payment date. So you could use the quick option, move it forward by 7 days, 30 days, or to a specific date. You could also simply exclude it. So if you just weren't sure when, a payment was going to be made on these invoices, perhaps it's quite old, maybe from last year when things were a little bit tough for them, you can exclude it here. It's not going to delete it. It just won't factor it into the forecast right now. Same will apply to your bills to pay, so I won't go through that. But if I head back to the cash flow tab, I'll just show you how you enter your budgets. Now, budgets in Float, they act like empty placeholders or buckets, and then they fill up with those invoices, bills, or transactions as time goes on. So nothing will ever be double counted in Float. So let's say, for example, for sales, I'll just jump into April here. I have a few budgets that I've already put in for April, and they all add on top of one another to make your total down here. And you can also see any that have come into the paid section, which then fill up that budget as I mentioned, and you can see all of the line item details here. And to create your budget, you're just clicking back to budgets, click create budget, and you can set it as a once off every week and so on. If you do it as an every week, Float will automatically pick up how many weeks are in the month. So if there's 5 weeks in a month, that'll automatically generate. And then picking your end date, we can forecast out for up to 3 years ahead. And then just ensuring you're picking, the approximate or, as accurate the date as possible for when the money will actually come in. And then ensuring that the amount is inclusive of any tax that's paid within that amount. And finally, then what I did mention during the presentation was the scenarios feature. So, with Float, you can model out those different hypothetical situations without making any changes to your base figures here. So this is our base, or like the official forecast. If you wanted to create a scenario, like the most popular question that we get is, can I hire a new staff member? So what I've done here is I've created a scenario layer just by clicking into this, and I'll just show you what that looks like. So you can see now it's showing me on the graph how that's going to affect my cash going forward. And all I did for that was I scrolled down to my wages and salaries at the very end, and I just said from June onwards, what if I was to add this new hire to our company? And I'm adding on the additional amount that it would cost to hire this person. And also another really neat feature is that you can update any budgets within your scenario. So let's say they were to increase my sales. I could click in here and increase sales. And again, you can see how that affects the cash going forward. So you could do it for anything, if you were, as you saw in the presentation, if you were to lose a client, if you were to take on a new project. A lot of construction companies would use it for project-based work, when they're not sure if the income is over 80% just yet, they'd use it for project-based. And then, if it becomes a reality, then they can change that later on. And that is a quick demo there. If anyone has any questions now, feel free to send those in.
Thank you so much, Amanda, for giving us that demonstration. So feel free to jump in and ask questions. I do have one here for you. The lady isn't able to access her mic, so I'll ask it on her behalf. Does Float sync with NetSuite? If not, can you import the data?
No, unfortunately, we don't sync with NetSuite, and no, it wouldn't be possible to import the data. So as I said, we integrate with QuickBooks Online, Xero, and Free Agent. So you would need to be using one of those accounting softwares in order to connect your data to Float.
You're welcome to, thank you very much for that answer, Amanda. Martha, you're welcome to ask the question if you want. Just take yourself off mute. I
think you're still on mute, Martha.
Still on mute.
Okay. You went through budgets and scenarios, but how are budgets really different from scenarios? Under what situations would you use the two different features?
Yeah, great question. So with budgets, when you are getting set up in Float, not everyone would set budgets, so you don't have to set budgets, because you can rely on your invoices and your bills that come through. But, for any kind of transactions where there wouldn't be an invoice or a bill, you'd click in and you'd create that budget. So for example, here, let's just take a look at advertising in May. Now, I know I've had actuals previously, but there's nothing here showing in May. So I want to put in a placeholder because I know that for May, I'm going to have a $100 outgoing to pay for my advertising. So I'm going to stick in that budget. So I'll just show you that. And then I'll just do end of cash flow. And I'll say, on the 21st of May, I know that $100 will be coming out of that account for advertising. So what I want to do is I want to put it in as a placeholder. And now you can see going forward, it accounts for every single month that I'm going to pay that $100. And when I do have the transaction reconciled from Xero, that will come through to paid and it'll fill up this budget. Now, let's say, for example, I wanted to see if I could increase my advertising from August onwards. And I think that the outgoing is going to increase to $300 a month. What you want to do then is you want to create a scenario for that and see how it would affect your cash. So if you go up here to your scenario, click in here, and we'll just call it advertising increase. We'll just pick pink and then create that scenario layer. And what you can see now is it looks the same, right? Because we've pulled in all of the same details from your base forecast. So let's say for advertising, you just come down here. And as I said, from August onwards, I think that the budget is going to increase to $300. Now, I already have 100 forecasted in, because when you're creating a scenario, you're pulling in everything from your base. So all you want to put in is the extra amount that you think you might spend. So I'm going to put in an extra 200 and say that'll happen from the 20th of August You can leave it as advertising. I'm just going to change it to advertising increase and do end of cash flow. So now you can see the difference between, this is my scenario budget and this is my base budget. You can see it's increased to 300, and you can see on the graph then how that's changed. So it's actually very close to the base. It's not making a lot of a difference. So that's good. So that's how you would, use the different tools. The scenarios feature, it's not going to change anything on your base. So if I switch back to my base now, you can see it's still $100. I haven't made any changes. I'm only just making that change to a scenario to see hypothetically if I increased it, what would that look like?
Thank you very much. Do you have any other questions there, Martha?
Nope.
No. I know that when I worked for a big organization, you would have a main budget that was set for the year, and that was it. It was absolutely, it never changed. But then you would have a review budget that was revised every quarter, and then monthly, which you would align, which is kind of like the scenarios. But the main budget that was set, that was agreed by everyone, never changed. We have another question here. Can you have multiple accounts change for the single scenario?
Can you have multiple accounts?
Can you?
You can, sorry, yes, you can, if I go back to new hire, so you can input, they want to know if you can input multiple budgets in here. Yeah.
No, multiple accounts. So a single scenario could affect income and it could affect expense. Is that, I think that's what she's asking. So that's.
Yeah, so it definitely can. So for example, for the new hire, what I did is I went down to my wages and salaries and I inputted exactly what would happen here. I'll just show you. So I pay my wages and salaries every 2 weeks. So I put in, from June onwards, if I did hire this new member, what would that look like? And when I did do it, it kind of showed a little bit of a drop in the graph, and I didn't like that. And I thought, okay, what if they increase sales? What if they're a salesperson? And I clicked in here and I created another budget for sales and said, what if they start bringing in an extra $3,000 at the end of June? So yeah, you can 100%. So I mean, like with construction companies, they might put in their income, and then they might go down to their labor, their cost of goods, and so on and so forth, just so they can really get down into the nitty-gritty detail of how that will affect your cash.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. Does anyone, thank you very much, Amanda, for that. And does anyone else have any questions? Was that you, Nicole? Nicole?
My question, I have a couple of clients already using Float, and they're in construction, so it's a great example. And they use the scenarios for various projects. They don't do lots of projects at once. They might have 6 or maybe 10 running at a time.
Yeah.
And what we would like to be able to see is if they've put out 6 tenders, what if they won tender 1 and 3? We'd like to have 2 scenarios sort of on top of each other. If they won 2 jobs at once, what would that look like? At the moment, I believe that's not possible. I'm hoping that you're going to say, yeah, but it's coming.
So it's not possible to stack the scenarios on top of one another. But if you go into the Insights tab here and we go into the scenario comparison, you can actually layer the scenarios on top of one another. So you can see exactly what that would look like if they were to, let's say, accomplish, as you said there, the project A, project B, and so on. So you can go in here and stack those on top of one another.
Okay.
And also, sorry, my colleague has just prompted me there. Sorry about that. If you go in here to add scenario layer, what you can actually do is you can duplicate it. So if you had, let's say, project A, project B, and you were increasing that each time, you can actually duplicate them in here when you're creating them. So you're not creating kind of double work for yourself. So you can create, like I've seen people do for 10%, 20% increase of sales, they'll duplicate each one and then make those little tweaks.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So it's like you go, okay, a new employee scenario is default this, and then you can just keep applying it through various months as you're planning on growing.
Yeah, that's it.
That's really smart. That would be a massive, once you've sat there and planned it out, that could be a massive time saver, especially for a company that's looking to grow and looking to work out how it can do that.
Yeah.
So we've had another question. Is there a setting whereby Float will automatically add, say, 3 days to all due dates of receivables. So pushing them out by 3 days.
Yeah, I have had this question come up quite a bit actually, where you know, you can kind of do that in Xero and then pull that through, or you can automatically update it. Unfortunately, there wouldn't be. So if you go into back into the invoices due here, it would be kind of a manual change where you could click on the 3 dots here and you can change it to a specific date. So the payment schedules was what I've heard people do. You know, if they have a 30-day invoice payment date or a 60-day and so on, there wouldn't be an automation for that within Float. Another thing I will just point out while I'm in here, it might be applicable to that person who asked that question, is you can actually do split payments. So if it was a case where you had an invoice where there was a deposit, like a 50% deposit, and then there was a later payment, you can actually come in here and you can split those out. So that might be helpful.
Especially relevant for constructions where there's lots of payments coming through.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you have the ability to set funds aside for specific purposes?
In terms of like, can you clarify?
I guess you're kind of quarantining the funds, the funding.
Do you, would it be something like an overdraft or a line of credit, or?
I guess you're saying, okay, this cash cannot be used for, this cash needs to be put in a special place and can't be used. So you have it, but you can't use it. You can't tap into it.
I'm not sure on that one.
See, I think this is not the scenario, but I think the scenario for some people would be they would put it into a separate bank account so they'd almost not see it. But if they hadn't put it into that bank account, is there a way that you can go, okay, it's here, but you can't touch it?
If you look at, you can actually set up a separate bank account within Xero.
Yes, yeah.
You have to do that step first, and then you have the toggle, you have the gear icon here
of not including it. Okay.
Exclude it or include it. Yeah.
Can you not include, say, particular accounts?
I mean, it's best to include any bank accounts that you have transactions posted against that you are using in Xero.
Yeah.
But it gives you that accurate picture within Float. Yeah.
Yeah. And Nicole's, someone else has asked this question, so I'm relaying a question that they've asked. So that's why I didn't have the exact scenario there. And Nicole has suggested perhaps you could use an overdraft with a positive balance or something like that. So you may, if you had that, set it up as a different account and then not include it within the float coming through. So hopefully that is a way to do it, a different way to do that. Yeah. Thank you for answering the other question that Deb asked as well. We appreciate that. Are there any other questions? I know some people, Vanamala, have your questions been answered? Is there anything else that you'd like to ask there, either in the chat area? So Nicole, do you want to jump on and ask your question?
I was just sort of answering the previous question. If you're wanting to quarantine a certain amount of money, this example shows when you're going negative, but you can set an overdraft amount, can't you? So that it goes red when it drops below a certain level.
Yeah.
You could possibly do that, but with a positive number. So tell me when it's going to drop below 10,000 balance.
Yeah, so this is your cash flow threshold here. So if you have that overdraft of 10,000, you just chuck that in here and then click your save changes, and then it'll let you know when, so mine is still showing never, but if you were to go below that, it'll show you here on the left hand side. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you Sharon, so much for bringing that to our attention, Nicole, and sharing that, Amanda. Are there any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, so it's basically similar like the question I asked already in the email which I sent to you. If you can create a forecast cash flow report, but dividing it between different sources of income. I have a client which has many really separate sources of income, but they're all under the same ABN and company. And so they want to have a look, or is that profitable or not, or shall we get rid of some of it?
Yeah, I think I actually, yeah, that was the question that came in today, Heather, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. So it was the categories, wasn't it, that you were relating that to, the tracking categories from Xero?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, okay. So unfortunately, we don't pull in tracking categories from zero. But what you can do is that you can create multi-budgets. So for example, here for sales, like in that example that you've used where the income is coming from multiple sources, they'd all pull in here under sales as one. But what you can do is you can click in and you can create those multi-budgets. So if we look over here on the left-hand side, I have multiple invoices here showing. So that's multiple sources of income. But what I'm doing is I'm creating an individual budget for each one. So, I'm creating one here for 3.5, 1,200 and so on. And you can create as many budgets as you like. And as I said, the budgets, they're acting like buckets. So nothing's going to double count. So when your invoices are then paid, it'll fill up those budgets.
So would I need to do that manually? Is that what you're saying? Like in order to...
Yeah, it would be a manual, I suppose, process. But when you're getting set up with Float, the most manual part that we say that you have within Float is the budget setting. But then once you kind of have them all set up, that's for going forward then, and they just need to be tweaked or edited as you go along.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you for your question. We've had a couple more questions. Chris, did you want to jump in and ask your question? Oh, he was on the screen a minute ago. He's not going to come back. Okay, I'll ask Chris's question. If you have a partner account, is there a minimum number of licenses that we need?
No, not at all. Like I said, when you sign up to Float, I'll just click back into the partner dashboard here. You can have no clients. Hopefully you will have some, but you can have no clients on here, and you can have your free license down here, which it's being used at the moment, but it would usually say free license down here. So you can, use the free license for your own firm, and that's always there to use. You don't have to have any clients, and then you can add as many clients as you like also.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that, Amanda. And we've had a question. What do the reports look like?
Yeah, sure. So on the
Good question.
So on the cash flow tab, you can actually export the cash flow to a PDF or a CSV. Now, more recently, a cool, neat feature we've introduced is you can set a date range, which some people are very excited about because, you might want that particular time range, not just what you're seeing on the graph. So you can set your date range in here, and then you can export that to a PDF. Now, it's quite useful because you have your cash flow graph on the first page, then you have a little summary, and then you have a full breakdown over the next couple of pages. So, if you are doing monthly management reports, and if you want to incorporate cash flow into that, you can. If you look on the Insights tab, there's a few really helpful insights. I won't go through them all in detail, but I suppose maybe one that might be really applicable here that you might find you're using already is the budget variance. The budget variance is great as it'll show you your budgets, your actuals, what actually happened, and the percentage difference. And you can select if you want to look at it over the last month, over the last 3 months, and eventually it will be 6 months the longer that you're with Float. So yeah, the Insights tab would be a great place to pop into, but I suppose the main one that we do see customers using will be the cash flow one on the cash flow tab.
Yeah, and the budget variance one that you just highlighted there is a really important one for advisory in terms of if you've planned for something and it hasn't turned out that way, while you as the bookkeeper or accountant may understand it, the actual other people in the business may not understand it, and actually being able to note down what has actually caused that difference, what you planned it to be, what it turned out like, and what actually caused that difference, whether it's interest rates, whether that's increased or decreases in scale. And that can actually really highlight, help them planning, because planning is such an ongoing process, and it can help them refine their decision-making process if you can just explain what that difference is.
Definitely.
Sorry.
And, another one there, just to quickly point out, because you actually mentioned something really relevant, Heather, that I said that if someone in the business isn't too familiar with the numbers, what I've pointed out here recently is this one. Now it's, as you can see, it's a very visual insight, but it's great for people to, to see the numbers. It doesn't drill down into the actual detail, but what you have is you have these bars. So the very, very dark shades is what has come in and what has gone out. Then the next shade up from that is what's due to come in and go out. And then the lighter bars are your budget. So you can see then here, like for March, for example, I, massively over budgeted from what came in for that month, and I was pretty on track with my cash out. So it's a great kind of visual view, again, if you're presenting that to a few colleagues within the business.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Amanda. Does anyone have any questions? Any more questions? Yes? Jump in, Nicole.
I have another question. I've got the same client that's in construction, and their accountant has advised that they need multiple entities to do various and assorted different things. Is there any possibility of having multiple zero files feed in? They have one entity receives all the money and a different one pays all the bills. And so it's very hard to get the cash flow. We have to do it all manually.
Yeah. So like cash flow consolidation is definitely something that we would like to have in the future. It's not unfortunately on our immediate product roadmap, I would say, but it's definitely something that we'd like to consider. So when you are connecting multiple zero files to float, what we tend to say here is that you can actually also export the cash flow to a CSV. So what we recommend is to export each one, and then any consolidation to do that outside of float within your Excel file. It's not ideal, but it's the best workaround that we have at the moment.
Okay. Thank you.
No worries.
Thank you so much for your question, Nicole. Any other questions? If not, thank you so much, Amanda, for joining us today. We really appreciate your time today. How can people get in contact with you? Looks like you were ready for me.
Yeah, so this is just a bit of information. If anyone does want to find out more, so you can head to our website here. Just to point out, with the partner program, you do get an extended free trial. As I mentioned, numerous occasions, you get a free license for your firm. You also get discounted pricing for multiple clients, and we do have an extensive resources hub. I'll just introduce you here to Dylan Burgess, who is our country manager here for the APAC region, and he would be communicating with a lot of our accountants and bookkeepers. So feel free to reach out to Dylan there. That's his email, and he'll be more than happy to chat through. If you want to, have a chat through a demo or on the account or anything like that, feel free to reach out.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us here today, Amanda. We really appreciate the insight that you gave us and providing that demonstration and answering all of our questions. And hopefully people can get in touch directly if they need some support there.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks so much, Heather, for facilitating this. I really enjoyed it.